All right, new location. Who this? Still me. I just trying different locations to see the lighting is better. So, in today's qualified at the intersection newsletter, we're going to really dig into Executive Order 14283. And that is the order that Donald Trump signed related to, well, part of it was related to HBCUs. And, you can read this newsletter where I get into really good detail, but it reminds me of the movie The Usual Suspects. And also, apparently, this is attributed to a French writer. But the phrase that the greatest trick the devil ever played is convincing the world he didn't exist. That's how I feel about Executive Order 14283 in HBCUs. It is definitely a sleight of hand, a trick designed to make you think everything's good here. I don't have any bad intentions toward Black people in higher education, while at the same time making predominantly white institutions hostile places for Black students, making it difficult for Black students to access financial aid or even to speak words related to race on campus. Now, when you look at this executive order, on the one hand, you think, oh, it's going to be great. But when you really read it, it talks a lot about private sector. It talks about shifting private sector, shifting to the private sector. And that is really very meaningful because a lot of people say, well, President Biden had this executive order. Well, let me tell you about President Biden's executive order. It was Executive Order 14041. I have to read this because, I can't know all of this off the top of my head. But it established the White House's initiative on advancing equity, excellence, and economic opportunity. And it required all federal agencies to submit plans for increasing engagement. Oh, there you go, with HBCUs. And it emphasized capacity building through grants, research, partnership, and federal contracts. And it also was housed at the Department of Education with cross agency coordination. And it built a pipeline for HBCUs to participate in full federal funding landscape. So, education, workforce, health, infrastructure. All right. So, when you look at President Trump's executive order, it recast the HBCU initiative as under the banner of innovation and excellence without the equity language. Okay. And then it removes it from the Department of Education and positions it within the executive, which sounds good on its face, but it's giving political appointees more control over this work. It replaces federal investment language with more calls for that private sector partnerships, effectively trying to privatize the responsibility here. And it undermines systemic support while appearing neutral or even supportive, right? And you have to look at this order in the sense of all the other orders, right? You cannot just look at it in isolation. So while this is happening, predominantly white institutions are being legally stripped of their diversity offices, scholarships, and inclusive programs. There is a hostile climate being developed in these spaces. And HBCUs then are portrayed as the sole remaining safe harbors, but without real federal commitment to make sure that they are sustained and potentially federal interference. And so this to me feels like Jim Crow logic. I'm sorry. Isolate Black students through institutional hostility on predominantly white institutions, segregate opportunity while pretending that you're being fair and merit based, and shift the burden of survival of HBCUs that are already under resourced to private endeavors, right? And so you see, you can't look at things in a vacuum. So at the same time they sign this order, they go after Harvard. And let me tell you, this article was in the Guardian. They go after the Harvard Law Review and they say the reason is because it's under investigation by the Trump administration over a Black editor's anonymous article defending diversity in publishing. Now, why would the Trump administration go after that? Can you write that if you're at a HBCU? It's like, is there an invisible wall when you go to HBCU, or will they also be policed? These are questions without answers at this point. But here, the Guardian says this probe raised concerns that the administration is creating an environment where even the discussion of race equity is seen as misconduct in predominantly white institutions. I mean, you something should feel amiss here to everybody. This is not neutral. And the NAACP also called this out in a powerful statement on April 28th. The NAACP said, this is smoke and mirrors, right? This is not what we think it is. This is not designed to be what we think it's designed to be. And of course, that was my phone. Every time you really get going, you forget you turn off your phone. But NAACP says the facts are clear. Support for Black institutions cannot be measured by photo ops or public relation campaigns, right? We need policies that empower and safeguard and invest in our communities. And the NAACP goes on to say this executive order is nothing more than smoke and mirrors meant to divert attention, the sleight of hand. Remember, the greatest tricks need good sleight of hands, while they are dismantling and resegregating on predominantly white institutions and in the workplace. So I have a chart below that you can see kind of the mashup between these executive orders and this executive order and Jim Crow segregation and how it lines up. And you'll be shocked at how it lines up. And what can you do? Well, there's danger in silence. We have to speak up. Share this piece, tag your representatives, call out the differences. A sleight of hand only works. The greatest tricks only work because you go with the illusion, right? You have to say, "Oh, I saw you move that under there in this game of three card Monte," right? You can't pretend and be mesmerized like you don't know what's happening. You can't pretend that you don't see on the one hand what's going on with the other hand. We have to ask ourselves, what are we willing to do to stop this trick from working? And again, I say again, the lack of reporting on this by media outlets is criminal. Is criminal. When we look at the cumulative effect of these executive orders around race, we are looking at a tsunami of rollback of advancement that African Americans have made over the last 50 something years. And for those who are promoting this on these platforms and others, the other question you have to ask yourself is, where will these HBCU graduates work in such a hostile work environment where disparate impact can't be considered, where you literally have to be caught calling somebody the N word, and that probably won't work, to be disciplined, where technically and legally, federal contractors can segregate cafeterias and water fountains? Tell me what kind of work environment HBCU students are going to go into. This is not about merit. It never has been about merit. I've said this before and I'll say it again. Merit is a red herring. We never had a merit based society. What we have is a society that was for the in crowd. And we started creating blockages and called them merit when people from the out group sought entry. These merits base is really blockages. And so that's what we need to think of it as. And so I ask again, what will people do? I ask you to share this information broadly and support this Substack. There is other work that I want to do. I am very interested in a national campaign to catalog Black Americans who are being fired or losing their contracts, and specifically told it is because these executive orders, which to me amounts to race-based discrimination. And we don't have a good catalog of that. And in order to do that work, it requires support, it requires funding. So I ask you to support the Substack and share it. Thank you so much.